Whilst society cannot really tell the difference between wisdom and mere pretty words, it can tell when its most precious attachments are under threat, and its defensive response to that perceived threat can be quite significant. The would-be wise person ignores this at his peril. Since wisdom entails the abandonment or transcendence of just about everything society commonly values, it's necessary and inevitable that such a person will find himself in complete opposition to that society, or at least near to complete. That opposition doesn't need to be deliberate or overt. It's just a natural consequence of what that person has discovered and what they have become. But one cannot abandon the false beliefs and attachments that surround them and not be perceived by society as something quite alien to it. For the wise person to act in a way that made society perceive him approvingly, he would have to act in a completely false and deceitful manner. He would have to act in a way contrary to the nature he had built for himself. Genuine truths remain true in any possible world and in any possible state of consciousness. This is what makes them a genuine truth. If one can figure out what remains true of things in what is called dreaming and wakeful consciousness, one has discovered something truly significant. Perhaps you'd care to consider the question of what remains true of phenomena in each of those states. Truth is a goal. It's something you aspire to like anything else, but you have to place value on it to have any chance of attaining it. The motivational force that underpins the valuing of such an attainment will necessarily be egotistical security or happiness. This is for sure and certain. Every wise person begins his journey motivated by a flight from suffering or dissatisfaction of one kind or another. When it comes to enlightenment, the specific kind of suffering that is necessary is the suffering over one's ignorance. It isn't possible for a person with a fully intact ego, which is what everyone starts out with, to do other than value and pursue things egotistically. What happens along the way, however, is that the path itself undermines the ego, and that motivation falls away, and the pursuit of truth becomes increasingly pure, which is to say, it simply becomes who and what you are, without the egotistical force. To me, there's a significant factor in truth valuing that is seldom recognized, one that helps shed some light on why an individual might come to value such a thing, and that factor is the tendency towards reason and consistency and authenticity of thought. We tend to think that the cause of a person's truth valuing is more likely to be that they have, in the past, been damaged by mendacity of some kind, either their own or that directed at them by others. And whilst this may be a factor, it's not the source of truth valuing I generally speak of, or am particularly interested in. By that I mean there's a difference between truth valuing as in wanting people to be honest in their dealings, and truth valuing as in wanting to have an accurate and consistent perspective on the nature of reality. The latter demands a natural tendency towards intellectual integrity. It demands a mind that experiences discomfort in any weakness or contradiction or fault in its concepts. Everyone, at least in the beginning, is looking for happiness. The truth valuer sets out on a course of inquiry that he hopes will sublimate a psychological need. And that certainly seems like looking for happiness to me. But our natures, and therefore our values, are not static. We evolve in our consciousness. We evolve in our perception of things, and our values change as a result of that. We might experience an insight into some aspect of life or reality which changes irrevocably our entire value framework. Some of us will give expression to our natures by way of a desire to fulfill the psychological propensity that I spoke of earlier, that of the tendency towards consistency and completeness of thought. Who and what we are in any given moment is the culmination of our past lives, that is to say, our causes. We can make some reasonable guesses at the most significant factors in that evolutionary process, but ultimately the causes are infinite and unknowable. We can point to certain biological facts and maybe some events in our lives that we believe to have been formative, but we can never say exactly why we are who we are. We can, however, consciously work toward being a particular thing. That is to say, we can will an authentic self. In society, genuine individualism is a kind of maladjustment. I'm not at all interested in a deluded society's notion of what it means to be well adjusted. A person who is well adjusted by society standards is almost certainly a fool by mine. One should be wary of any kind of psychological reflex. Non-conformist reflexes aren't really any better than conformist ones. One of the difficulties we face is our inability to fully disengage from conventional notions of success. If you're not working hard and accumulating stuff or improving your social standing in some way, you're basically being antisocial. It's understandable, really. Society can only measure your value on the basis of what benefit it perceives itself as deriving from you. Any wish you might have to improve yourself purely as an individual is a bit too removed. Even though we may talk about and institute something like paid maternity leave, it's kind of doubtful that you will anytime soon see something like paid enlightenment leave, where a person is paid to spend 12 months meditating on a hill in Tibet somewhere. Self-improvement is something you're supposed to do on your lunch break, not something you drop out to do. You see, dropping out is perceived as antisocial because it suggests to society, implicitly if not explicitly, that society is not the solution to your malady, and that it's even perhaps the cause of it. If atheists insist on taking the intellectual high ground, it behooves them to actually be occupying it. Their affirmation is not of religious untruthfulness, but their own valuing of truthfulness. I'm not having a shot at them here necessarily, but I've encountered too many atheists who seem to have a phobia about being honest about the nature of their values in those things which they clearly affirm. It's as if they automatically associate affirmation of any kind with a religious mentality. Many atheists, humanists, rationalists, and associated trumped-up braggarts who consider themselves to be the intellectual superiors of religionists are all too often guilty of speaking the most insipid shit. Their worst crime is that of denying that they have any dogma of their own. That claim is quite galling when they, almost to a man, suggest things like empirical observation or science is the only means of gaining knowledge of the world. They deny that this is dogma, yet, in that denial, they are denying life and vigour to reason itself. Thanks once again for being with us here at Men of the Infinite, your dedicated wisdom channel. We hope you'll stay with us, and in the meantime remember that truth is valuable.